Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and thank you so much for tuning into another one of our Conversations at Home videos today. Before I hand over to today's wonderful panel, I want to continue reminding everyone watching these videos that we're continuing to raise money for our COVID-19 Emergency Assistance Fund. This is working to support actors who are out of work with all of the film and television productions closed right now, with buying groceries, paying rent, paying mortgages, whatever it is that they need to get by financially day by day at the moment. So please check out the details below this video and consider supporting if you're able to in any way. And it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to today's moderator, Chaney.
Thank you so much. Hi, Daisy.
Hello.
It's great to talk with you. I loved Normal People, and I'm really excited to talk to you about the show. But before we start talking about that, I was curious. Obviously, this has been a difficult time for people who have loved ones who are ill, people who are ill themselves, medical workers. But even for those of us who are healthy and trying to quarantine and be safe, it can be a little bit challenging. Like on a scale from I am okay being at home a lot to I am climbing the walls, like how are you doing?
Yeah, it sort of shifts day by day. I'd say I'm like at a kind of middle 5. I know that's kind of a cop out, but I'm okay being at home because I think that, you know, it's not too much to ask to stay at home, but at the same time, you know, I do really miss my friends and my family. So I am a middle 5.
Middle 5, that's a good place to be, I think. So one of the things I love about Normal People, and I talked about this a little bit in my review, is that I feel like a lot of times when we talk about teenage romantic relationships, we tend to act as if they're, minor or things that you'll forget about when you get older and have, quote, real relationships. Mm-hmm. And what I really like about this series is that it shows you how much those relationships matter, how much they imprint on you and kind of carry through your adulthood. And one of the things you had to do as Marianne was to show that kind of maturation process. And obviously aging when you act is helped along by wardrobe and makeup and things like that. But were there things that you had to do as an actor to sort of demonstrate that progression for people?
Yeah, and it was tricky too because when we were filming, we weren't filming chronologically. So like we were sort of doing location to location. So the first 2 weeks we actually spent at Marianne's Sligo house, but above that, in one of the rooms, they'd made it into Gareth's apartment, which is where one of the biggest sort of scenes where we first meet Marianne at Trinity. You know, when we see that she's kind of grown up a bit. Have that conversation at Gareth's party, and that was in the same location as Marianne's Sligo house. So, you know, for the first sort of week and a bit, I was playing younger Marianne, and then the next day I was doing, you know, kind of a really important moment that shows how much she has kind of blossomed. So yeah, makeup and hair were like, you know, incredibly helpful because I think the clothes that you wear really help with the way you hold yourself, you know, if you kind of dress in clothes that are a little bit more kind of I guess fashionable and exciting, and you know, when she starts wearing heels, you do walk differently and you hold yourself differently. But I think I used quite a lot of the pointers in the novel that Connell sort of, from his chapters of the way he describes Marianne to kind of really help with that. And, you know, particularly he speaks a bit, you know, about her having sort of eye contact that kind of bores into the back of his head, you know, with earlier Marianne. So I kind of used that quite a lot with younger Marianne. I made her quite, she uses quite a lot of eye contact and she's quite kind of intent, you know, and she's very sort of honest about things and doesn't feel like she has to play a part at all, because I think that's what's so exciting about her is, you know, she doesn't care about sort of fitting in at school or being a part of the social ladder, so she doesn't have to act, you know, anything. She's just herself and she doesn't shy away from that. And then I think when it comes to Trinity, you know, even though it would seem that Marianne has sort of blossomed and suddenly feels, you know, is very confident and has loads of friends and is really popular, I think she's actually struggling a little bit more because, you know, she's in this world, but she still has quite a low self-esteem and a low view of herself. So I kind of almost, particularly with that first time Trinity scene, I kind of thought of Marianne sort of playing the part of someone who is really confident, but not really being that person. So, you know, she's acting a little bit. She knows she can push his Connell's buttons. So playing with the joy of doing that was quite fun. But it was a challenge to try and track those
yeah.
Marianne's.
Yeah, I also got the sense watching it, you know, she was, as you said, always direct and intense, but her directness and her intensity became an asset. Even if she didn't always feel it internally, it was an asset when she got to Trinity. Whereas, before that, it was something that was seen as a negative.
Completely.
So with regard to the wardrobe and hair and makeup stuff, did you get any input? Did you get to have a little bit of a say as far as what she would look like?
Yeah, I mean, I had quite a lot of costume fittings, so we were kind of constantly trying clothes on throughout the whole show. It was like always sort of trying on clothes, and I think we did have quite an open discussion of when we really felt something worked. I do feel this is quite good for Marianne. We talk about that, and with hair and makeup similarly, I quite like exciting, and I love kind of exploring that side of things. So I had really fun conversations with Sandra and Sharon, who did my hair and makeup, about how Marianne suddenly, starts to style herself as she grows older. And so, Sharon and I would talk about like a bit more of a heavier eye makeup, and kind of she goes a bit, fun with her nail varnish, and like with kind of the Sweden stuff, about having a more of a heavy fringe to kind of hide herself and stuff like that. So it was quite an open dialogue, but I was very lucky to be working with some amazing people who were at the top of their game. I couldn't believe like how they even began to sort of style those characters, and both Lorna and Sharon and Sandra did such an amazing job of it. So
I'm sure you're aware of what a sensation Marianne's bangs have created.
I am. It's really, it's very surreal. It's kind of a strange one, because I got my fringe kind of in response to not getting much work. I got really close to a part, and I was like, I didn't get it, and I almost did that thing that you do when you break up with someone, where you get like a breakup haircut. So for me, it was a fringe, and I have a lot to thank my fringe for, because I feel like it did help quite a lot in getting the part of Marianne, because it's quite quirky, and she's quite quirky. So yeah. It's very
So I wanted to talk about the the love scenes in this, which of course I know you've talked about ad nauseum at this point, but it is such an important part of the show, in that it establishes so much about the intimacy between the characters, and those scenes tell you so much about who they are. And I know that you worked with an intimacy coordinator pretty closely from the very beginning, but could you talk a little bit about that process, what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing process, and I'm very sort of, I can't believe that it's not been the norm for a very long time, because it feels like I don't know how else you would go about doing those scenes, because they are so important to the story. They're so brilliantly written, and they are so integral to telling a story of a relationship between two people as they grow up. The physical side of things is an incredibly important part of that, and so it was really important that we were able to have someone like Ita to create a safe space for us to have an open dialogue about those scenes. And it wasn't just for Paul and I, but it was also for Lenny and Hetty and Element, to know that everyone was completely safe and comfortable with everything, so that there was no kind of grey area. And I mean, we sort of discussed at length, what exactly we were trying to communicate with each moment, and we would discuss what each other was comfortable with, day to day, so that, if you never felt like you were ever going to overstep anybody's boundaries. And then, we'd kind of choreograph it, oh, what's happened? My video's gone a little bit funny.
Oh, are you
fine?
Okay.
Sorry about that. I was like, my face suddenly went really big. So, sorry.
That's okay.
But so we would kind of make sure that everybody was really comfortable with everything. And then it just meant that when it came to filming the scenes, neither of us were ever, whoever you were doing those scenes with, you were never worried about anything other than acting the emotion that you're trying to, and the story beat that you're trying to carry on in the story, because that's what they're there for. They're always carrying on a particular emotion or plot beat. So it was really important that we were able to concentrate on that and do justice to the acting of that, instead of being worried about being self-conscious or not being comfortable with everything, or worrying if the other person wasn't comfortable with everything. So she really just created that really safe space for us.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the very beginning, I believe Ida did like an ice-breaking exercise with you and Paul. Tell me about that.
Yes, she did. And I have I no longer do, but at the start of Normal People, I had quite a high, quite a low embarrassment threshold. So I embarrassed quite easily. I no longer have an embarrassment threshold at all now, but definitely at the start I did. And she kind of, she told us, how she works, and so we were completely up to date with everything. And then she was like, let's do a little warm up, but we had to do this little dance around the room. And I haven't gone to drama school, so I was like, I hadn't really had much experience with doing that, so I was getting all shy, like trying to do my dance. But it was really good because it, that the whole, you have to feel safe with somebody. You can't feel self-conscious, you can't feel embarrassed. You have to know that you have an immense amount of trust in each other. And so being a bit silly in front of someone was quite good because it very much broke the ice.
I remember I was in a production of Kiss Me Kate in high school, and there was like a dance number, Too Darn Hot, where everybody had a partner, and it was supposed to be very sensual. And our director made each of us sit with our partner and like touch each other's faces for what felt like an eternity.
No.
And that actually made me feel more awkward than less.
Oh God, I couldn't.
I mean, especially for like a 16-year-old, it was a nightmare. But it sounds like this had the opposite and the proper effect, which was to make you feel like you could, release your inhibitions.
Yeah.
And then in terms of you were talking about choreographing the scenes and making sure that you and Paul had the same comfort level. But what's really remarkable about those scenes to me is that they feel so natural. They feel like it's all very organic. Was there room for improvisation within that framework?
Well, because that's what, weirdly, we were kind of more free because of the structure that was put in place, if you know what I mean. In that we always knew, exactly what was, we knew exactly where was okay in terms of when we were filming the scene. We knew what each other was comfortable with. So there was never any worry of, am I able to do this? Because I don't want to make that person, feel uncomfortable if they're not okay with it. So we would always be completely 100% sure of what the boundaries were. And also you had lengthy discussions about where the camera would be, because that's also very important, because you have to make sure that the camera is able to capture what it's meant to capture. So there would be a kind of choreography so that the camera always knew where it should go, if you were going to do a move, move in any way. But once you kind of have that framework in place, you were then able to act the scene, and play the part. And we did have a kind of freedom to improvise, as much as we needed to in order to make sure we got the story across. And it also meant that Lenny or Hetty could direct us and, ask us to play something a little bit differently, but we always knew exactly what our kind of baseline structure was, which was really helpful. But we definitely still had room to kind of improv around it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, watching it, a lot of those scenes, there are really tight close-ups. I mean, how close was the camera to you?
Yeah, it was very close. Often it was like, probably about there with a very shallow depth of field. So it was incredibly close. Yeah, you could see every mustache hair.
And in terms of, I mean, were these sets where there were, fewer people? Did they try to keep it? Okay.
It was, we'd have a skeleton crew. So it would be like only the people in the room that needed to be there. It would be kind of usually the camera, the focus puller, the intimacy coordinator, and the director, and the boom op. So it would be incredibly, small, intimate crew. So you never felt like, you knew exactly who was going to be in the room and who would be present. And so we'd have a skeleton crew.
Okay. And then there's one love scene, the sort of the early on one that's like 9 minutes long or something like that. Was that shot a little bit later in the schedule so that you could have that comfort level with one another?
Is it the first time that Marianne...
At Marianne's house, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah.
Yes. That was quite later on into the shoot. I think it was at least 3-4 weeks into it. So we had enough time, but we had done some scenes beforehand. I think we had our first load of scenes the Friday of the second week. So it was pretty pretty quick, but I think that was quite good because, you know, as soon as you it's always the thought of something, as soon as you've done them, they kind of started to blend into the schedule a little bit more and not kind of pop out when you look at it. You're like, oh, I know what's coming up next week. You know, they kind of started to blend in a little bit more as we got more and more kind of comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the average person watching this would probably assume that the hardest thing to do was those kinds of scenes, but was that the case, or were there other aspects of this that were more challenging for you than the love scene aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say strangely those scenes were some of the least challenging once you kind of got the first few under your belt, because there wasn't much kind of, you know, the acting was quite, you knew exactly what you were doing. You know, you always knew exactly what was being communicated with each scene. So there wasn't much room for like a nuance in between. Whereas with like a big long dialogue scene, you might start one place, but you know your character's going to journey to a very different conclusion by the end of the scene. So when you're about to start with the first line, you're like, oh, I've got a lot of beats to hit in this moment, you know, because you might have 2, 3, 4 pages. I mean, some of those scenes, I think there was a scene in episode 11 that was like something like 15, 20-minute takes, you know, and it felt like we were doing a play, but you know, once action's called, you're like, oh, we've got a long way to go until cut, you know.
That's true. The love scenes, you don't have to worry about lines. That's for the most part. So, your parents are both in the entertainment realm, is that right? Yes. So you kind of grew up around this to some extent, but do you remember when you kind of first realized that you wanted to go into acting?
Yeah, I mean, because my mum was a drama film editor before she had me, and you know, so she was always really brilliant because she has a really wonderful insight into, I guess, an editor's perspective of performance, which is, you know, incredibly important. That's all about kind of timings and beats and things like that. So she was always really helpful when it came to acting. But I think I didn't really realize I wanted to do it as a career until I was about 14. I'd always loved it at school, and I'd always kind of really enjoyed it, and always felt that it was something I was able to do, you know. And so I think my mum encouraged me to audition for the National Youth Theatre, which is this brilliant company in the UK, which sort of has lots of young people from all over the country who can do sort of plays with them every summer. And I auditioned when I was 14, and I got in, and when I did my induction course, that's when I met lots of people who were really like-minded, and also who knew far more about the kind of industry than I did. I didn't really know what drama school was or what an agent was, and so suddenly that kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that it could be a potential career choice. And so it was sort of around when I was 14 that I thought, oh, this is something I would love to do.
What was your first role?
So my first like professional role was a character called Olivia in a show called Cold Feet, which is sort of like the British equivalent of Friends. It was massive in the 90s. It was it's about 5 adults in Manchester, and I played one of the kids of the adults in the Comeback series, which came out, I think, when I was 17. So it was probably like 2016, 2017. But so that was my first role. It was quite a small part, but it was a really brilliant place to learn, because I could kind of learn without the pressure of having to like hold up a whole show. I could kind of watch and observe and learn the simple stuff, like not being self-conscious, you know, walking across the screen. Whereas, you know, now I'm confident doing that. But I remember the first time I ever did it, you know, I was like, oh my God, what do my hands do when I walk? Like, how do I look natural as I do this, you know? So I got a bit more used to those kind of things, which was good.
Right. So at the risk of putting you on the spot a little bit, do you remember when you were young, was there a particular actor that you sort of really fixated on or really admired that kind of hooked you into this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, so when I was, I think 14, I studied Romeo and Juliet for my GCSE coursework, and I actually did a Juliet speech to get into National Youth Theatre, because I fell so deeply in love with Claire Danes as Juliet. I thought she was just incredible, and I you know, she's such an incredible actor, and she was so young at the time, and you know, that was a part that was closer to my age, so I could kind of think, oh, you know, I learned a lot from watching her. So yeah, probably Claire Danes.
Oh, that's a great answer. I love that Romeo and Juliet so much.
It's the best. It's the best. It was very fun to have to study it.
So have you watched all of Normal People, like every episode? Is that Is that hard? Because I've talked to a lot of actors who just never watch themselves. They just can't do it. But I would imagine if you can, that maybe it's useful to do that.
I think so. And I think it's funny because I think it's very hard. It's very hard to watch something and not be completely sort of biased to the fact that to the experience you remember when you filmed it, if you know what I mean. So sometimes
Sure.
you watch something, especially for the first time, if you haven't had much of you're not able to be very objective because there hasn't been that much time that has passed. It's very hard not to watch it and be like, oh, I remember, I wish we just had 5 more minutes to do this because I would have done that differently. Or, oh, why did I say the line that way? I remember that day when I was stressed because of this. It's hard sometimes not to do that. But I really, for the first time ever, I watched Normal People and I didn't feel that. And it was really strange feeling. But I think because I had such a positive experience filming it, and also because I was so amazed by the incredible work that Lenny and Hetty had done and Element had done in terms of, I didn't really know what the scenes looked like through the lens. I only really knew what they felt like when we acted them, and the camera work is so beautiful and the grading and the music. So I really got lost in it actually, and that was really fun because it felt that I was able to watch it and not completely overthink every scene. I was able to kind of enjoy it, and but yeah, it is a strange thing watching yourself, and it's not something I love doing, but I was able to watch Normal People and not be crippled with self-doubt, which was nice.
And what about your parents? Did your parents watch it?
They did.
Did you watch it with them?
So I actually, Paul and I got sent them before. We got sent them at the end of each, before they went into audio. So we got sent them when they were being picture locked so that we could kind of have a look before they carried on with editing and audio and stuff. So I got sent them. So I sent them to my parents. So they were well prepared for when it came out. They had at least an idea of what was coming up, and they just loved it. I think similarly, they got quite lost. You get quite lost in the story that I think, they forgot it was me, which is a really nice thing. I mean, I think it's probably still a little bit strange, but, I kind of thought more of my friends would be like, oh, that was a bit odd. But most of them are like, I loved it. Gosh, those scenes were so beautiful. They don't seem to think of it as me, which is a big relief.
Well, it's also a huge compliment, to your performance that you really felt like somebody else to them.
Which is nice. I mean, probably because the accent's so different, and I am quite different from Marianne. So,
I mean, you talked earlier about kind of getting past your embarrassment threshold. When you think back on working on this project, are there certain things in addition to that you feel like, okay, I took this away from this experience, and I'm going to take it with me, into the future and use that as I act?
Yeah, I mean, so much. I mean, particularly I'd never been, because I had never played a lead role. I'd never been sort of on a job every single day where you're completely involved with the whole process. And I found that really interesting. So I learned quite a lot from just listening about, why Lenny and Hetty would choose a particular camera position, and, discussions about setting and discussions about negative and positive framing and things like that. And I think I found that whole side of things so fascinating, because I think Lenny, has a very special way, and Hetty, of sort of telling perspective. And I think you can see from when you watch Room that he manages to sort of take us into the inner life of a 5-year-old boy, and he's just got such a special way of communicating a character's inner life. And I learned so much from that job on how to do that, on if you do have a camera that's right there, that can be a secret relationship you have with the audience, and you can maybe show them sides of things that you wouldn't, particularly in a wide shot with the other character.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that really interesting, but also just realizing that it can be really fun. You can work really hard and it can still be really fun, because everybody on that job was such a laugh and so nice, and we were all just really excited by what we were doing, and it felt like a group of friends having a go at making Normal People, and I think that's amazing. And I hope that in the future I'll be able to continue to work on jobs that are really lovely and fun, and that I make good friends from them. But yeah, just probably also having a good work ethic, because it's hard work, but it pays off.
Mm-hmm. And so you're in this unique position now where you really have this breakout moment from being in the show, but everything's kind of on hold. How has that been? Has it made you think differently about what you might want to do next?
Yeah, I mean, it's been so strange. The whole thing has been so surreal because, it's odd to think of having a breakout moment because my only experience of that really is digital. Do you know what I mean? It's not,
Yeah.
It's not, I'm still just in my bedroom. So it's quite odd, but I guess, yeah, I mean, I think it's been so lovely to have seen such a wonderful reaction to the story. And I think I'd love to therefore, in my next kind of few jobs, find stories that are equally as important in terms of, portraying the truth of being a human, you know what I mean? And I think finding characters that are equally as interesting and complex and flawed and funny and strange and brilliant as Marianne is something I would love to be able to do. And working, I felt so lucky to have worked with, a female writing team, a female producer, female DOPs, female first AD, female director. I'm, that was really exciting. So I'd like to continue to kind of, maybe work with other brilliant women as well if I can. But yeah, just brilliant writing and brilliant filmmakers is what I'm really passionate about. And hopefully I'll be able to find something as good as normal people. I feel I might have been a bit spoiled because it was a really brilliant project.
And certainly your chemistry with Paul Mescal was wonderful. And from what I've been able to gauge from just reading about you, it seems like you have a nice relationship off screen as well. Can you imagine working with him again, or are you so known for these characters? Would it be too hard to be in something else?
I think it'd be such a fun challenge to explore two very different characters together, because I love working with Paul. He's a brilliant actor and one of my best friends. So I would, yeah, I'd love to work with him again on like two really different characters. It would be a very fun challenge to see what we would do together. But yeah, I think that would be really cool.
Here's what I'm going to suggest. Get Baz Luhrmann to do another Romeo and Juliet, and then you can each play this.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Daisy. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And like I said, I really admired your work in this, and it was a joy to watch and a joy to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for chatting with me.
Yeah.